My name's Bubash. I'm here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm actually from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been tattooing for the past 40, I'm not sure exactly, 44 to 46 years maybe, because I can't remember when I started. I was brought up by Tom DeVita in New York City. I had run away from home when I was 18 years old, and by the time I was 19 I met Tom DeVita. By the time I was, say, 21, I was tattooing because, well, probably a little bit later than that, maybe 22, because DeVita wouldn't, it wasn't like the old days. He wouldn't give me machines until I got my arms completely tattooed. He said then I would know something about tattooing. And DeVita is an interesting character, and he's well known at this point. He got known later in his life. But as an apprentice, it wasn't stated at any time that I was his apprentice. It took me about a year to get the balls up to ask him to teach me the tattooing. The way I met him is I went to get a tattoo. I had a little rose, and I went to get another stuff added to it, like most people do. They get a little, put their foot in the water, and then they want to come back and get more. And you know, and after that experience, he made me bring a drawing, which I did, and they changed it around. And after that experience, I brought some drawings of my own, some great big dragons that I drew, not Japanese, but they were dragons drawn after Art Nouveau. But they were drawn well, because I've been drawing since I was a kid. My mother was an artist, and she always used to tell me, if you want to belong to the club, you have to know how to draw, or you can't be in the club. So, I mean, that made me draw, you know, because I was of the art set of mind rather than my father was a scientist, my mother was an artist. And I got the art thing, along with a whopping case of dyslexia, which makes me a very good sculptor, by the way. So DeVita was, the thing about DeVita was an artist first, and then he was a tattooer. And I think he began to tattoo sometime in the 60s, I'm not sure. Back in those days, in the 1970s, 71, 72, when I started tattooing, I know I was tattooing by 72 because I have a photograph of myself with him, Paul Rogers, and Freddie Clouston, who was Tom DeVita's doorman, like counter guy, so to speak. And by that time I was tattooing with Paul Rogers machines in 1973. So I know I was tattooing by 73, probably 72. And I set up my own tattoo studio in the Chelsea Hotel in New York City on 23rd Street. That was my first tattoo shop in the corner of the room I was in. And of course I didn't do much tattooing because there wasn't much to do. You know, like I had other jobs in order to keep myself alive, driving a truck, driving a cab, doing landscaping, etc. And I tattooed when I could, you know. And DeVita's apprenticeship wasn't, it wasn't like the things they do today. It was more like I was taught by example. I was taught by watching him do things, and occasionally he would mention something on how to do things. I remember there were a couple of times when we sat down and made needles together. That was one thing that because we used to make our own needles. Anyway, it's an old story, an old-time story. And after I got out of DeVita's, I was with Tom for about 5 or 6 years, I guess. I moved back to Pittsburgh, and I opened my first tattoo shop, 1976 Island Avenue Tattoo in McKees Rocks, which is a little suburb, so to speak, of Pittsburgh. Actually, you just go across the bridge and you're in McKees Rocks. And I had that shop until 1982, and I sold it. And at that point, I was getting over a drug problem that I had managed to keep alive for quite a while. And after I got over my drug problem, and that, by the way, is primarily why I sold the shop, I went back to art school, which DeVita always encouraged me to do. DeVita kept saying, go back to school, go back to school. School to him was more important than tattooing. As I said, he was an artist first, and then he was a tattooer. Of course, now there are artists that are tattooers. Back then, where it was pretty much like a folk art kind of a thing. There wasn't a whole lot of real fancy stuff going on, you know, but that came soon after I started, you know. So I went back to school, and at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, I went there for 5 years. I graduated with top honors, and I was given a grant to study anywhere I wanted to in the world. I studied sculpture, figure sculpture, and I chose India as the place I went to study. So I went to India and I studied for 6 months there. I went there primarily to see the ancient bronzes that were made during the 9th and the 11th, between the 9th and the 11th century, that are still considered to be among the greatest bronze sculptures ever made by anybody in the human race ever. And so I went to see those things. I enjoyed India very much. Came back after that and went back to tattooing. And let me think. I went back to tattooing at Island Avenue, the place I had sold. And I stayed there for a number of years, and I did sculpture at the same time, and I did artwork. And my concentration was never really on tattooing. My concentration was on doing fine art and getting shows and galleries and things like that. And eventually I was in the Ed Hardy's I Tattooed America show in 1991 in Chicago at the Ann Nathan Gallery. And that show was, I think it was about 30 tattooers who were also fine artists. That's what the show was about. And I think it was probably the first of its kind, or maybe one of the first of its kind, where tattooers were considered fine artists, or the art of tattooing was considered fine art by the establishment, so to speak. And after that, I met and became very close friends with Tony Fitzpatrick, and I started working at the Big Cat Press there making etchings, and I continued to do etchings for a number of years and with Tony, and damn near moved to Chicago but didn't do it. I couldn't get away from the dependency of tattooing, because tattooing, as Ed Hardy always used to say, tattooing is art that pays. And it is. So I continue to tattoo. I tattoo to this day. It still supplements my income, but most of my time now, at the age of 68, I spend making artwork and I've had shows all over the country for the past 35 years or so. Represented in 7 major museums around the country. I just had a show in Chicago, opened June 2nd at the Adventure Gallery on Western Avenue, and of drawings. And what else is going on? I just got a commission to do 7 demon sculptures by some people here in Pittsburgh. The lady that commissioned me to do the demon sculptures, I've done a number of sculptures for this particular family, but she writes horror novels, so demons are right up her alley, you know. So if you want to see any of my work, you can go on nickbubash.com, which is my webpage, which is now currently being updated. If you want to see any of the new work that I'm doing, that I've done in the past so many years, go to my Instagram account, which is at Nick Bubash, or just Nick Bubash, spelled B as in boy, U-B-A-S-H, on Instagram, and you can find the stuff there. I don't know what else to say, you know, like I'm supposed to do a takeover for Instagram for the tattoo, American Tattoo or something like that, but like I have a telephone that since it all has to go to a telephone, typing with a telephone with my thumbs being the size that they are, like every word I type turns into a different word. If I type rutabaga, I get swim fins. I mean, I can't, and I can't imagine like telling you what I just told this camera. Writing that on a telephone will probably take about 3 days. So I'm really dragging my feet on it. Plus, I'd have no pictures from the 70s. Never took any, 1 or 2, 3 pictures maybe I have from 1970 tattooing. Not that I was doing like really great tattoos. I was doing like, mediocre, like we did, DeVita taught me the Coleman style of tattooing, which the Coleman style was you make a black and white drawing and you fill it in with color. It wasn't, it wasn't that fancy. Like in the words of the great Tony Polito, who just passed away, unfortunately, God rest his soul, he used to say, I ain't here to win no fucking art contest, I'm here to make money. But at the same time, he was a good artist, and of course they've turned traditional art tattooing, which is what I learned and what I still do to this day. And I do portraits and things like that, because I do have the ability to draw and stuff like that, but I was taught traditional tattooing, And so anyway, that's the story,